Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Joyce, the Olympic silver medalist from 2016, is considering a report that shows that there was some corruption that took place at the Rio Olympics. And there is some doubt that has been cast in the report by Richard McLaren about some fights associated with Tony Yoka, or at least by association. And I'll get to that because it's not just a case of saying that judges were in favour of Yoka, but perhaps that they gave an easier path for him to get to the medal rounds, and that has been suggested in the report. You can see here on screen, so this is Joyce's statement from social media. It's sad to see corruption in any sport, but particularly in boxing, the sport I love. I firmly believe that I was the winner of the match with Tony Yoka and deserved the gold medal, but on the day, I did not get that decision, and at the time, I accepted that. I have scanned the McLaren report and have read that there was corruption in AIBA, and that corruption affected the result of my gold medal match with Tony Yoka. If corruption has taken place, and it appears that it has, I trust AIBA and the IOC will ensure the integrity of the sport is upheld and award me the gold medal. I will be considering the report in detail with my legal team and await the decision of AIBA and the IOC. Corruption should never be allowed to succeed. So that's Joyce's statement from social media regarding the McLaren report. And he says that corruption affected his gold medal match. It's not quite as black and white as that. There's quite a bit of sort of nuance with this, and when I get to the report, because there's only 4 mentions of Joyce in the report itself. So this is the report here. So the McLaren Independent AIBA investigation. So we will, when it says MIIT, because there's a number of references in this, just referred that to the investigation team. So independent investigation of the AIBA boxing competitions prior to and during the Rio Olympics 2016. So I'm not going to go through obviously line by line, page by page or anything like that, but it does sort of set the scene in terms of what this report believes happened in the lead up to the Olympics and also during the game. So for the purposes of this video, we're a heavyweight channel, so I will be covering the Tony Yoka stuff because that's quite interesting. There is some other sort of suspicious bouts, as it were, that are referred to and reported on in this McLaren report. So what I'll do first is get to a couple of the key findings. So they say that there was a system for manipulation of bouts by officials existed at Rio. The seeds of this were sown years before starting at least the Olympic Games of the 21st century through the events around 2011 to be discussed in the next stage. So obviously there's going to be a part 2 of this, and London 2012. The qualifying competitions along the route to participation in Rio 2016 were the practice ground for the corruption and manipulation of bouts at Rio. At the Olympic qualifiers, the manipulation methodology was fine-tuned in anticipation of use. Rio, must be at Rio, in Rio, something like that. The manipulation methodology relied upon corruption with the cadre of corrupted referees and judges and the draw commission. Key personnel took on powers that they did not have on paper. So we'll just go down. Bouts were manipulated for money. That the president should bear some responsibility. The president's tenure, so this is for AIBA, dating back to 2006, means he must bear ultimate responsibility, yada yada yada. The evidence gathered by the investigation may result in decisions by AIBA to refer individuals for disciplinary consideration. So these are the referees, judges, and some others potentially involved in this. What they say is obviously corruption in the sport of amateur boxing. A comprehensive study of the bouts at Rio indicates approximately 9 bouts that were suspicious beyond the two raised in the media at the time, and may be necessary to further examine those bouts for which no definitive conclusion can be made at this time. The problems with completing that analysis is due to the delayed receipt of the 5-score bout sheets. Therefore, there may also be other bouts which are suspicious. However, the time for analysis was too short to include in this report. The ongoing work for the investigation team will include further analysis. The investigation team indicates that Rio was clearly a low point for AIBA. Significant steps have been taken to correct the process of officiating. Okay, so what we're going to do now is, because there's 29 references to Tony Yoka in this report, which is, a number of pages. It's quite detailed. We're just going to cover the Yoka elements, but the first thing that we'll get to is, you can see here on screen, so this is not necessarily a bout Tony Yoka was involved in, but it's one that was on his side of the draw. So it says, for example, in the case of Hussein Ishaya of Jordan versus Mihai Nistor of Romania, this has been linked to Tony Yoka bout analysis, as allegations persist that this bout was fixed in order to allow an easier passage through to the medal rounds. And that's for Tony Yoka. Subsequent to identifying these associated bouts, the investigation team examined the referees and judges appointed to officiate in each thereof. So I've got a keyword search here, which we're just going to flick through, which is Yoka, 29 references, as I mentioned. You can see, so they've detailed here in this figure 7, the different referees, judges connected with Tony Yoka, his bouts, including also this other one that was on the side of the draw, which is the Jordanian fighter versus Mihai Nistor. And as we know, Mihai Nistor was a decent amateur. With that fight, basically it was given to the Jordanian, although those who saw the fight probably saw that Mihai Nistor, and especially in the final round, was dominating the fight, didn't get the decision. So we'll just flick down here. So it talks about, for Tony Yoka's fights, that there were no 5-star referees appointed to any of the Yoka bouts, although it should be noted that had already been stood down from their duties prior to the semi-finals. A range of 3-star referees and judges were used across Yoka's 4 bouts, with no significant patterns emerging. Then it goes into the different judges, etc. In terms of this Ishaya and Nistor bout, this bout, which has been linked to Yoka for allegedly providing him with an easier path to the medals, was a close-fought bout according to the scoring. However, according to a number of commentators, this bout was more one-sided than the score suggests, to the extent that the win should have actually gone to Nistor, the eventual loser, by a larger margin. We'll get down to past that now, because obviously it continues to talk about that. I want to get to the stuff around the final, because obviously this is what Joyce is concerned about, but there are some referees, judges, and some of these bouts and this associated bout with Nistor, etc., that are linked to Tony Yoka. So it goes on to say, Yoka made relatively straightforward progress to the semi-finals, winning 5-0 on both occasions, only dropping 2 points in the preliminary and quarter-final rounds, the latter being against Hussein Ishaya, the victor in the contentious bout against Mihai Nistor. While there is no evidence to prove this, the ease in which Yoka overcame Ishaya, according to the scoring, may well support the allegations that the bout against Nistor was manipulated to ensure that Yoka had an easier passage through the semi-final round. Yoka won his semi-final against Hrgović, Croatia, 2-1 on points, bracket 4-1 with all 5 judges' scores, with only Benjamin Denmark scoring against him. According to the bout sheet, the final against Joyce was a much closer contest, and this is key here, and I'm going to get to some thoughts immediately after this, because I've gone back and watched that final. It says, with Yoka again winning 2-1 on points, but only 3-2 on points if all 5 judges' scores were counted. This means the result would not have been assured in favour of Yoka, and could have been reversed had different judges' scores have been picked under the random selection process. The Turkish judge Emre Aydin providing the biggest margin in favour of Yoka, 30-27. There's a little bit more here, but effectively covering some of the same sort of territory. So it is quite an interesting report, this McLaren independent AIBA investigation. So while Joe Joyce is saying that, he hopes that the IOC and AIBA will ensure the integrity of the sport is upheld and award him the gold medal, not quite as simple as that, because it's not necessarily saying that he was robbed in the final, but it is saying that potentially some of the fights around Yoka and on his side of the draw were suspicious. Although, if you go back and watch that final, and I encourage you to do so, it's not easy to score. I know there seems to be a narrative that's developed over the years that Joe Joyce bossed that final and he was robbed of gold. But if you go watch that fight, very tough to score. I found it, very close competitive fight, and you'd expect that for the Olympic gold medal match. In a way, it was similar to the most recent final where you had Bakadir Jalilov against Richard Torres. One of those sort of fights where some of it was, what do you like? Because you could have made a case that Richard Torres could have won that as well. And similar here, it was, what did you like in those rounds? Because Tony Yoka, I think, was having the more sort of flashier success in terms of he might land a jab, rock Joyce's head back. He might land a right hand, which was just a bit more eye-catching than some of the work Joyce was doing. Joyce was doing a lot of good work to the body, probably being unrewarded to some extent for that as well. But a lot of his shots, even though he was throwing more punches, he was outworking Tony Yoka overall in terms of what he was throwing. A lot of that was landing on the gloves, your forearms, elbows, shoulders, all that sort of stuff. It wasn't just some sort of, Joe Joyce won all the rounds and got robbed. It was a close fight, and even round-to-round scoring, which was coming up, was showing some of the judges were, on both sides of the fence of the scoring. But clearly, with the sport of boxing, the Olympic movement and AIBA, something was rotten. And they've brought in Richard McLaren here, and this is obviously the first part of which is going to be a bit more wide-ranging. Maybe they will be having a further look into that gold medal match. Maybe there will be some more evidence that comes to light, some more analysis about Tony Yoka, that side of the draw that he was on, potentially even the gold medal match, even the semi-final with Filip Hrgović, because certainly there are some that believe Hrgović was unlucky to lose to Yoka as well. But there is a suggestion that in this report, Yoka was potentially given an easier path to the medals. And I guess the other thing that I would say about this, apart from clearly Joe Joyce, he feels a certain way, and maybe something will happen in the long run. I don't know, but I'm not sure it's as black and white as he's sort of painting in his statement, although clearly something has gone on and there's some suspicious activity around that Olympic draw. 9 different fights they've identified, some stuff around Tony Yoka, but that's not to say that he didn't legitimately win gold. We have to sort of say that as well, because obviously if you saw the fights, a lot of these fights are close and competitive. But I guess the other thing as well, what would it have meant for Joe Joyce had he have won that gold medal? Because his career in the pros could have started very differently. When you're the sort of, the silver medalist, taking home a bronze and all that sort of stuff, it doesn't quite have the same allure and luster. You don't get the same sort of buzz unless you're already a big household name. But a gold could have been a real springboard and kickstart for his career in the pros. Think back to, guys like Audley Harrison, also from the United Kingdom, Anthony Joshua. They became big household names on the back of what they did at the Olympics. And Joyce sort of missed out on that by getting the silver. So if he did deserve the gold and was awarded the gold, he could have actually, things could have turned out very differently. But he's going to be examining this report with his lawyers. And I'm not a lawyer or anything like that. I'm just going through some of the different points here, giving my thoughts. But I don't think it's as cut and dried as what Joyce is making out, that somehow, he was robbed and that he was going to get the gold. It doesn't say that in this report at all. It does suggest that there was some funny business, at least in terms of the side of the draw that Yoka was on. Maybe some of the judges, hard to say. It doesn't categorically say anything about that gold medal match. And as it says, it was a close fight and Yoka wasn't assured of getting it. And if you watch it, it was a close fight. Sam Jones, his manager, He says 2016 Olympic gold medalist Joyce boxing, give Michael Conlon his medal as well. And obviously that is the subject of the report as well, talking about Conlon's final bout, in which he ended up walking out of the ring when he didn't get the decision, giving the judges the finger. It's one of the suspicious bouts that has been named. Tony Yoka, meanwhile, he hasn't said anything public as far as I can say on social media. No postings about this, but obviously he does list 2016 Olympic champion. So I think there's still some water to go under the bridge here with this McLaren independent AIBA investigation, because we're going to get a part 2, maybe a part 3. It's not over. This is some findings. They obviously are going to continue looking into this and potentially put some remedies in place in terms of recommendations. AIBA itself, if we're just getting to its website, it notes the McLaren findings, and it says, following the publication of the report for the first phase of Professor Richard McLaren's independent investigation into boxing, AIBA noted the findings regarding the Rio 2016 boxing tournament with concern and confirmed that extensive reforms have been implemented to ensure sporting integrity at current AIBA competitions. Quoted as saying, and this is the AIBA president, Umar Kremlev, says, Professor McLaren and his team have identified a system for manipulating the results of bouts at the Rio 2016 boxing tournament. I am determined to ensure that boxers receive a fair fight. This determination is demonstrated by AIBA's clear commitment to uncovering the truth and acting on it. We must now carefully examine the report and see what steps are needed to ensure justice. What is important is that we make sure mechanisms are in place to show that the results are above suspicion. It's the president of AIBA. So, I mean, we'll have to see if they really do anything, because they have been cleaning up their act in recent years. Maybe this is a report noting stuff did happen, and they will end up, like a lot of, it'll end up being a bit of a whitewash. They end up just sort of saying, look, we've basically answered everything that's sort of raised here, and we've moved on. We're above suspicion now. Will they go back and overturn any results? It's a question. I think in the case of Mick Conlon, there's a good case there. Case of Joyce versus Tony Yoka, it's not as cut and dried, although there is some suspicion about some of the judging and that side of the draw, as I noted. Longer video here, but we had to get through all the nuts and bolts of this. But what do you make of it all? Drop a comment loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.